Hello, I'm Michael Marsh. Welcome to the program dedicated to reestablishing constitutional government, first in Oregon and then in the United States. Because both Oregon and the United States have a constitution. Both constitutions are being ignored. To have a constitutional government, you need people in office that actually believe in the Constitution. That's why I have candidates. Today, I have Jack Guest, who is a candidate for House District, Oregon House District 20.
21.
Oh, 21, sorry. Yeah. And he's running against Brian Clem, and we'll see why. First, why are you a candidate?
Because, as you preluded, is I don't like the way our government's running right now, how it's deviating from the constitutions, specifically the U.S. Constitution. I'm not fully aware of everything in the Oregon Constitution. It's a little large for that. Yeah. I was reading today where the Oregon Health Authority, which is where I'm from, is health, has been violating federal law in paying for abortions with federal money. Also where OHSU was using aborted fetuses part for research. It's things like this that I think are inappropriate and that Oregon should pay more attention to the Constitution of the United States.
Speaking of paying for abortions, there's going to be a ballot measure that would put a stop to a lot of taxpayer funding for abortion here in Oregon. Do you expect to take a stand on that initiative?
I will take a stand if I'm asked. I personally do not believe in abortion as an individual. As a candidate, I say, Jack, you have no right to tell any woman whether she can or can't have an abortion. But the caveat to that is, I do not believe the government should be paying for it.
Yeah, they take money out of my pocket. Okay,
Correct.
So you're opposed to the government funding, the taxpayer funding?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. I have seen you around the Capitol, and as a candidate, are you going to be pushing certain principles?
Yes, I have 5 basic principles that I'm looking at in addition to guns. I am a pro-gun person.
Yeah.
But fiscal responsibility of our government is very important. I was a finance officer for the better part of my career in healthcare. Limited government. Government is exceeding its authority. Government should only be involved in essential functions that can't be handled by the private sector. Free markets, I think, are very important with limited restrictions so that business can grow and our unemployment can increase, which puts money in everybody's pocket. It also puts money in the state's pocket through the tax structure. As that grows, the state can grow and accomplish its duties. I believe in local control, where the control, as much as possible, is down with the local people, the counties, the cities, whatever. And last of all, personal choice and responsibility. And now that comes back into the abortion issue. But we as individuals are responsible for our lives and responsible for what we do. And at the same time, we have to be held accountable for those actions, what we do, and we reap the benefits and pay the penalties.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you're pro-gun rights.
Correct.
And the Second Amendment is under attack.
Yes.
And your opponent, kicking and screaming, has voted to infringe upon our rights. What would you find acceptable and unacceptable as far as gun control legislation?
What I would look at for the whole issue, not just the specific gun control, is number one, the background checks need to be improved. They need to be a little more stringent, broader, taking into serious analysis of mental conditions and any mental instability that's on the record. That's probably foremost in my mind. As far as limiting the guns, etc., no. Today, a perfect example happened last night back east in a school. All of our schools, we've had several schools with gun actions on them. And to my knowledge, every one of them were in gun-free zones where the perpetrator knew that they were relatively safe going in there. Now, today or yesterday in Minnesota, or I'm not sure where it was, which
Maryland.
state? Maryland. A student came into the school with a gun, shot at two other students, a male and a female, wounding both of them. A resource officer was on scene. He jumped into action and shot the perpetrator. Still not known whether he killed the perpetrator or it was self-inflicted, but it stopped the shooting at that point. I am against 90x% of gun-free zones. I mean, in a jail? Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. But schools, post offices, things like that, I think it's ridiculous because guns if these gun-free zones are set up to where only the perpetrator has guns.
Yeah. One issue that's coming up, they say people who are mentally unbalanced or whatever, they're having problems, shouldn't have access to a gun. And restraining orders, things like that. Now, sometimes this sounds like, the one this morning sounds like there was already a relationship between the guy and the girl. So, and something went south, obviously. And that is an emotional time period when people, are in the process of breaking up. But most people get over it. And so if a person is a little out of control for a while, should that be a permanent, should we have, how do we deal with, a bad situation at the moment without making it a permanent bad situation?
Well, you've gone into kind of a touchy area because how many of us over the age of 18 haven't had a breakup?
Yeah, more than one.
With girlfriends, wives, things of that nature. So to blanket it that anybody that's had a breakup can't have a gun, that's a little out of line, okay? Now, how do we determine when somebody has gone south on a breakup? That's a very difficult thing to answer. Unless they have been charged or action has been taken. If the police have been called, like on that one we had a month ago, 20-some times to the house, well, yeah, I think that's a good legitimate reason for questioning that.
Yeah.
If a restraining order has been given, yes. But the restraining order one, I would think would be a temporary one.
Yeah.
Because, my ex-wife, I had to get a restraining order against her. But that doesn't mean that she should be restrained for the rest of her life. So it's a kind of a gray area that's going to have to be looking at basically almost on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, every once in a while, she's sleeping right now, but Camo, I tell people she loves me more than any of my exes did. And it's not a joke. She really does. So I understand. Breakups can be very, traumatic. But like you said, should this be a permanent problem? lose your rights forever. Yeah.
No.
Because most of the time, even if you're acting crazy for a while, after a few months, you calm down.
Well, that's human nature, though.
Yeah.
That's nothing abnormal or devastating.
Yeah.
To where we have to realize human nature is human nature.
Yeah.
And without it, we won't last long.
And they keep, they also talk about due process, because there is a problem of having due process. But it's going in front of a Democrat judge, really due process. How are we going to do the due process?
I would say in probably 90% of the cases, the party of the judge is irrelevant. I mean, they may have a little different thing, but they have laws to follow, and 90% of the time they're legitimate, honest people. Maybe 95%, I'm not going to draw an exact percentage. And we have to rely on our legal system. It's all we have to rely on. Now, those of us here in the Ninth Circuit Court have an interesting situation because it's the most overturned court in the nation. So that's why so many of ours, when you run into that situation, and this is your party situation you're talking about, that's what we have the appeals court for. And that way we can clear up to the Supreme Court. Now, when you get to the Supreme Court, you've got a problem there too, because in all truthfulness, it depends on who appointed the judges.
Yeah.
I do not see the Supreme Court judges quite as literal. They do a little more liberal interpretation. I don't really agree with lifetime appointments for these judges. I understand the principle so that they can't be influenced, but some of them I think need to be replaced.
Well, in the U.S. Supreme Constitution, the judges, they say they're, people say they're appointed for life, but they're not. They're appointed for good behavior. If you're not going along with the Constitution, are you really behaving?
I'll challenge that statement to some degree. If you don't go along with your interpretation or the current interpretation of the Constitution, there's many times when they have made decisions that I disagree with based on the Constitution. Yeah. Of course, I'm not a Constitution attorney either, but the point is there is interpretation of those words. They aren't 100% understandable.
Yeah. But, like here in Oregon, technically the judges are elected. Mm. But what they do is most of them step down in their last term.
Yeah.
So they're appointed by the governor. And over 90% of the judges were appointed. And so they are a political entity.
One purpose, as I understand it, for this step down is exactly what you brought up. Take right now in our situation where both the House, the Senate, and the executive office are all controlled by one party. A judge steps down. What party judge is going to be appointed in there and approved?
Yeah.
So that is one major reason why the judges step down at certain points, is so that their party judge can be reappointed. That's not totally what I feel, but that's our system. It's how the Constitution is written, and until it's changed, which I'm not in favor of a lot of constitutional changes, I got reprimanded by one of the representative staff last week. She asked me a question. How many amendments have been made to the U.S. Constitution? I missed it. And when was the last amendment approved by Oregon? I missed that. I'm not going to put you on the spot with the question, but I learned there are 27 amendments to the U.S. Constitution.
I would have been off, too. I thought it was 28.
I thought 24. And Oregon approved the last amendment in the 80s, 1980s. It was presented before Congress in the 1800s. But it was the 80s before it was finally got the two-thirds 2/3 or 3/4 majority vote.
Now, we talked about the fact that funding for abortion is going to be on the ballot. And you'll probably be asked about that. And there's another initiative that might be on the ballot, which is about Oregon's sanctuary state law. And there's going to be an attempt to repeal it. Do you think Oregon should be a sanctuary state or not?
No, I don't believe Oregon should be a sanctuary state. In fact, I don't believe any state should be. What is sanctuary? It's protecting undocumented aliens or illegal aliens. What's the definition of illegal? And what law did they break when they crossed that border? Was it a state law or a federal law? It was federal law. So the federal government has authority in that case, not the state. And I don't believe in protecting felons, beyond that even, that felons should be deported or thrown in jail, one of the two. And with many of them, as I've seen and heard, not seen, I've heard, yeah, they're caught, they're deported. A week later, they're right back here. So that leads us to that other issue, which is not a state issue.
Are there any laws that you propose to pass when you get in there?
No, not at this point. I would have to do more research and study before I would go off half-cocked and say this law should be done. Plus, I'd have to refer with legal counsel before I made any public statement that I was going to push for this. Beyond the fact that I will push for whatever is supporting our Constitution, I will push for the illegal alien problem, the E-Verify system, these systems that are very critical. I am pro-life. I will support those bills. As far as drawing a bill myself, I don't think going in the front door your first term, you're in any position to really do anything, even if you have a personal, I won't say bias, but personal drive that there's something you don't like. I think you need to learn the system a little more and go through the procedure some before you start throwing things out there. The best way to do that is by reviewing other bills and signing on as a co-sponsor of those bills if you really support them. Yeah. And if you don't, naturally you don't sign on. But ignorance is the biggest problem that you have going into a new job like that.
And speaking of signing on to laws, I've noticed for many years that a lot of bills have a quote emergency unquote
I was just thinking
clause.
the same thing.
Years ago when I first started watching the legislature, and the guy, he's up there and he's reading off the bill and talking about changing the name of a section of highway. And he says, this is declared emergency. And I'm saying, why? So, I mean, I could obviously there's a need for an emergency clause sometimes. Do you think the way it's used now is proper?
No, for the last several years, I've worked closely with Oregon Citizens Lobby, analyzing bills. In the 2017 session, I analyzed 185 healthcare bills myself. And I don't have an exact count, but I would guess around 170 of them had the emergency clause. Yeah. It was a standard thing that the legal department downstairs that actually writes these bills automatically put that on every bill unless the senator or representative requested it come off. Now that is abuse of a item. Like you said, there is a need for an emergency clause. If we have an earthquake, we're going to need some action.
Yeah.
Today, not tomorrow. But to change the name of 10 miles of I-5 really isn't too much of an emergency.
No.
Now, there is talk around the Capitol of putting through a change to that law, or even a constitutional amendment on this case, to require what makes it an emergency in the bill before they can add the clause. Something like that I would look at very positively.
I found out, that it could definitely be misused. 'Cause I thought a bill should be referred to the people, and I found out that if there's an emergency clause, they can't do that.
And that's why they use it.
Yeah. So now, I know it's part of the Constitution, that the emergency clause is there, but I'm not sure if you would need a constitutional amendment, or if the legislature themselves could say, as a rule, we're going to, this is how we're going to do this.
It's possible they could make a legislative rule, but how long do those rules last if somebody wants them changed?
That's true.
In power. So if you really want to put any real teeth into it, it would be a constitutional amendment to the Oregon Constitution.
And speaking of the Constitution, the Democrats have been, and some Republicans, have been pushing for what they call the national popular vote, which is an attempt to nullify the U.S. Constitution, where it's the Electoral College.
Yes.
Where do you stand on that?
I'm looking at not changing the national popular vote for one basic reason. The Constitution was written over 240 years ago. It's only had 27 amendments. It's proven as a very good workable document. The results we've had through our voting system has worked well for us. I know that in the last election, there was quite an uproar because one party got the majority popular vote and the other party got the electoral vote. But that is a very rare occasion, and I don't think it should be changed. I think we should stay with the Electoral College.
Yeah. And, a real good argument can be made that the Electoral College in the last election, it worked the way it was supposed to work because, it was designed to give small states a say in the election. Mm. Which, if you go to the popular vote, they don't.
New York and California and maybe one other state could control it.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any laws on the books that you would like to see repealed?
I'm sure there are. I can't name you one right off the hand, but there's many stupid laws on the books around. I know when I was in college, in Oregon, maybe it was just Corvallis, but it was where it was illegal for a woman to be seen in public barefoot. Now, laws like that are stupid.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be on the books. In fact, this is something you asked if there's anything I'd like to propose. There's something I'd like to propose. It'll never go anyplace. But that is that every law in the book had to be revisited periodically and repassed or thrown out.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because Oregon has at least twice, once in about 54, I think it was, and the other one in 73. They've gone through and thrown out bills, that's why it's called Oregon Revised Statutes, because they have looked at, gotten rid of laws. So would you be interested, if you're a legislature, to revisit that process?
What I was proposing of the laws having to be visited every so many years is exactly what you're calling. Yeah. And in that process, you either revise the law or you throw it out. So to answer your question, yes, it would be a good way to do it. Plus, one side effect to that is they wouldn't have time to pass a doggone many new laws.
Yeah. That would be good. We've got a little over 3 minutes left. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
No, just my personal candidacy and my challenges that I have. I'm running against a 12-year incumbent who has built up a tremendous war chest and fundraising campaign. I'm starting from scratch with nothing and no personal wealth to throw into the pot. And I'm in dire need, if you're in agreement with what I'm saying here today, to contact me and to serve either on my behalf as on foot soldiers or any other way, or financially, because that's what I'm going to need.
How would they contact you?
They can contact me through the internet at Jack Lee Esp, very simple, at AOL.com, which I can always get back to them and open a dialogue. Or my phone is open at all times, 541-377-8701. Notice that's an Eastern Oregon number, basically.
Yeah.
It's a cell phone that I got while I was over there, when I lived over there. But again, it's 541-377-8701.
Okay, trying to think if there's any more information that needs. Now, you mentioned the citizen lobby that you work
Oregon
with them.
Citizens Lobby, yes.
Okay. Now, for those who don't know what the citizen lobby is, what is that?
Oregon Citizens Lobby is a group of citizens from Oregon, non-denomination, non-party, denominational, we're a Christian organization. They are not affiliated with any specific party. However, they are leaning heavily conservative. The purpose of their existence is during the legislative session, they analyze bills and rank them basically on these 5 principles I gave you earlier. How do they fit into that? And they'll score them from 1 to 10, good or bad. Then they publish that information, both public and legislators. We go and lobby the legislators on these bills when they're in committee and stuff. Basic principle of OCL.
Okay, so maybe this time next year, somebody will be lobbying you.
Yeah, 2 years.
Okay. Thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hopefully you'll do well.
All right. Thank you.